No.
Test.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Hunt. It's 2:00 p.m. I'm the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. And this is our November 2025 meeting. Bob Fry, would you please call the roll?
Yes, good afternoon, directors. Please indicate your attendance when I call your name. Director Gardner.
Present.
Oh, excuse me. Director Wilson. Director Hahn.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. First, we have the committee agenda items. Item 2025-10 is to recommend that this committee review and receive the customer comments review report. And Amy Summers will provide information on this item. It's all yours, Amy.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to present the customer comments review. So if you go to the slide 2, the objective of the review was, I feel like the objective of the review was to review or evaluate policies, procedures, and controls for handling customer comments. The scope included data disposition, reporting resolution, routing process, timeliness of resolution, and type and validity and frequency of complaints or comments. Our scope was comprehensive, covering how customer comments are received, routed, investigated, and resolved, with a particular focus on timeliness and documentation being retained. The overall rating was considered to be low risk. There were no high observations, 2 medium observations, and 2 low observations noted. So you go to the next, yeah. For the first observation, it relates to the types of comments, frequency, validity, and resolution documentation with a rating of medium risk. It was noted that documentation is inconsistent across the departments. We noted there was great documentation being retained in the customer care group, but it was inconsistent across other departments that are providing comments and documentation for the closeout of the comment. So for validity, as noted in the charts on the next few pages, I'll just kind of summarize here. You don't have to jump forward, but it basically shows a pattern of across BRT as well as fixed route and paratransit. There's a high number of comments when they come through that are once reviewed, they're deemed as invalid. They might be an inquiry. So everything kind of lands there and they're kind of scrutinized and reviewed to see what's a valid comment. So that was reviewed. Frequency and time of the comment is being put out there. They're tracking all that documentation. Their reporting is what is included. If you like jump forward to the next screen, that's the reporting that we reviewed that's put out through their group that shows if the comment's valid, if it's invalid, and kind of the resolution, the type of comment, and then how long it basically took to resolve. So,
Hey, Amy,
yeah.
Can you just give me an example of kind of an invalid comment?
A lot of times comments will come through that will be more of an inquiry about why is your route changed or why, so it
Not
doesn't end up
necessarily
being.
question.
It's more of a question or an inquiry as to why something happened, not necessarily there was an issue with an operator had missed a stop or did like a pass by or something like that, that would actually be a valid comment that they would address with the coach operator through, like if they determine that it was an actual pass by or a missed stop, that they would refer to the manager to go
Yeah.
to the operator and
Okay.
address that with the coach operator. So getting back at the conclusion of our testing, basically showed that resolved customer comments need to be, or I guess contain more details from various departments outside of the customer care group to evidence the steps taken for resolution and to provide support for the comment being adequately resolved. There wasn't enough support that showed from the outside groups that it might have just said resolved, or, but we could see a clear kind of roadmap as to what was done to clear the comments. So anytime we would have to refer back to that comment, like if we were inquired again, maybe a follow-up to the comment from a customer, we could clearly articulate, oh, well, we tried to call you, these were the steps taken to try to address the comment. So we could see that, like I said, through the customer care group, but it wasn't consistent across the organization. So our recommendation was that training for all departments be done to ensure that consistent resolution documentation is being included. Management agreed and plans to conduct that training, and departmental meetings are scheduled sometime this quarter with an end date of the end of the year. Okay. And slide 8. For observation 2, it's regarding the timeliness of resolution and carries a rating of low. It was noted that the original 10-day resolution target is pretty much unrealistic to try to meet for all the customer comment types because we have delays that are due to external dependencies, like we have to request video, we have to do coordination with the operators there's a lot of steps we have to take for certain type of comments to get them adequately resolved in the system. So that 10-day time frame, sometimes it takes, and I can kind of defer to Brittany, but there's I think it takes, I don't know how long to get video. Okay. So yeah, so there's sometimes if it goes beyond that 72 hours, they have to put the request in. So it takes, and then you're already into it by the time it gets posted so it creates further delays. And so 10-day turnaround time is unrealistic for certain types of comments. So the recommendation would be maybe adjust those timelines by complaint type. If you know you're going to have to pull video and that type of stuff, you need to probably adjust that time so we're not already failing before we get started. Just to get a realistic timeframe.
Wait for just a minute. So is this 10-day time into respond back to the commenter?
Yes, to
So look-
close it, it's for absolute resolution. So it's not only that we actually turn around the time where we contact the customer sooner, but if we have to do investigation and that type of stuff, it just delays it if you've got to request video surveillance. But to close out the comment is the 10 days, not to reach out to the customer.
Okay, so I guess what I hesitate to suggest that we start doing things by classification and just, might I suggest that we explore responding to the commenter, to the constituent, in a certain number of days, 5 days, 10 days, whatever it is. And if it's going to take longer, then we say, this is in response to your initial request for a comment regarding fill in the blank. We suspect that it will take 15 to 21 days just to fully investigate and resolve this matter. And we will contact you with final resolution by whatever the date is. And then if you still don't get it done, you can come back to them and say, look, something came up. We're not quite 100% done yet. We expect to have it done by, next Thursday or whatever the date is. That way they are informed, they know that, but we're not trying to say, well, this kind of comment we're going to respond to in 5 days, this kind of comment we'll respond to in 10 days, this kind of comment we're going to respond to in 21 days. And then who's making that decision about what comment goes where?
Right.
Right. And then we've got people sitting around going, well, nobody's listening to me this way.
Right. So maybe we do it in response time, not as far as resolution or closeout of the
Right.
comment.
Yeah, I think you when you get the comment, you have an opportunity to look at it and say, yeah, this is a valid thing that we need to look at.
Mhm.
Then we go back to the constituent and say, we've received your comment and we're looking into it. We expect to have resolution by this date. And that way, no matter what the suspense is, right, you've at least reached out to them. They know that they're being heard, and then we can get back to them with the resolution on a date certain.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that's great. I think the 10-day resolution date is what we were, like responding to, not necessarily the response back to the customer, but that definitely could be included. And maybe just a wording change of not resolution, but maybe a response time. Acknowledgement
We
and-
acknowledge that they have
Yeah.
a valid concern
that-
and that we're looking into
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we currently do that? Okay. Thanks.
So the management agreed with that, and the service quality manager, which is Brittany, is going to establish the realistic timeframes, but maybe we can take that into consideration. And then, have something completed by the end of the year as far as what those timeframes look like, or expand the 10-day, or maybe change wording of that now in light of this discussion. Slide 10. Okay. This is the third observation and is a medium in risk and pertains to the standard operating procedures, or the SOPs. The observation finding included that the SOP is outdated as it's based on the HASA system only, and they've upgraded or implemented the SolarWinds as the new system they're using. So the SOP should be modernized and updated to reflect the inclusion of the SolarWinds system. Basically, our recommendation is that all involved parties update the SOP to reflect the process as it relates to SolarWinds. Oh, yeah, no, back. Oh, what is this? Okay. Thank you. So the management agreed with the finding and recommendation, and the management plan. The management plan is that the SOP will be divided into 2 categories, which one is going to be the investigation of the comment, and then the system information and reporting of the comments. So this is expected to be completed at the end of this year. And the final observation, slide 12. Yeah. This is the fourth observation, the final one. It is for the reporting of customer comments and is rated low. The findings indicated that the transition to solar winds has improved tracking, eliminated the redundancy, and a richer data capture. Reports are moving toward a more consolidated dashboard. Reporting has improved significantly with dashboards for providing better insights, and future enhancements are underway. So our recommendation is simply just to continue these enhancements and improvements. And then management obviously agreed with that, and new reports are already being used, and quality assurance reviews are under development. Ongoing improvements will be made through the end of the year to further. Anybody have any questions on that? Yep, that concludes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit here at Indigo. Before I go through this report, I wanted to share with you that beginning in January, we have designed a new template for our reporting, so we don't have text boxes next to each other that we have to scroll forward and back. We're going to have it in row format, so it'll be easy to go through in these meetings. I just want to let you know that. It has signed at the quarter that's sort of the same feel, but it's just going to be laid out different. One of the reviews that we were assigned this quarter was fleet management review. And so the scope and objective of that was to review the policies, procedures, and controls in fleet management. And our focus area were like defects reporting and tracking of our revenue service vehicles, the fueling and fluid process of our revenue service vehicles, and then looking in depth at the preventive maintenance requirements for both our BRT line buses, our fixed route buses, and our paratransit buses. And then based upon that, we wanted to make sure that we were following the compliance standards that are required or suggested by both the FTA and the manufacturer of the vehicle. Our overall report rating was a low. We have 2 low observations and 1 medium observation. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Our first observation to report on is a defect reporting and tracking. We rated this as medium. So each evening when the buses pull into the garage, our operators are supposed to complete a section of a logbook that's the second part of their logbook for the page for the day. So they start out with a bus inspection before they go on the road, and then they report any defects that they run across. So those are being done in a manual logbook. And we determined that the number of logbooks that we're using, they get pulled every month. So like we put fresh logbooks on a bus at the beginning of the month, and it's used for the period of the full 30 days or 31 days, and then it's pulled out of the bus to be reviewed and stored. We had determined that because we have a fleet size greater than our schedule requirement, that we had logbooks that only had maybe 1 or 2 pages being used and they were being pulled for the month. So we looked up the number of logbooks we're buying annually and having printed. And so we determined that it's costing like $16,250 a year just to print books to place into the buses. So then with the help of the fleet maintenance, the fleet department, they were able to pull the whole month of July books for me to go through. And so we went through all of those manual logbooks, and we determined that what happens is if there's an item listed on the logbook, when the bus comes in the evening, it's determined if it's really severe, it doesn't even get on our defect reporting tracker. It goes straight to maintenance to fix because serious problems have to be addressed first. And then if it's something that's easily to repair, like say replace a mirror, the buses are then put in the storage section of our garage, and the technician can go out and do the light duty work out in the garage. But when we looked at the defects that are listed by drivers and what compared to what's on the, they called it at the time safety sensitive defect tracker, which was an Excel spreadsheet, we found that in the month of July, 280 defects noted in the logbooks didn't make it to the Excel spreadsheet. Now, part of the reason is if it's a legit maintenance problem or a breakdown, it bypasses that piece and goes directly into maintenance. So that's one faction of it. But sometimes there were items that just weren't addressed and put on the logbook for the maintenance folks to know about. So we came up with I'll go to the next slide for me. I wanted to show this too. So this slide showed the number of reported items that are in a logbook, and if they repeated in the logbook multiple times over a month. So for example, we determined that there were 36 items in that first column, 36 items listed in logbooks that didn't make it into the tracker in 2 instances. In other words, and then the next one down is we found out that there were 18 items that were listed on the instant logbook at least 3 or more times. So the most that we found listed on the logbook was the same item 6 times, and that occurred 3 times in a month, if that helps. Is that understood? It's kind of complex. I fully admit that.
So Brian, let me just make sure I got it clear. So what I'm hearing you say is that some malfunction or some needed repair on the same bus, the same repair on the same bus was reported 6 times over a period of 3 months?
This was all in 1 month.
In 1 month?
Yes. So for example, on the far right, there were 6 items repeated on 3 instances. In other words, a broken mirror was listed 6 times, a headlight out 6 times. I'm making those up, not right, but 3 instances of 6
What I'm
things.
trying to get clear in my head is it's the same thing on the same
Yes.
bus
Yes,
6 times?
yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So our observation that came out of this was, well, a recommendation also was to evaluate if we could bring in electronic defect reporting instead of taking it from a logbook and putting it on a spreadsheet. We did do some research and we found out there's multiple companies that provide, it's like a notebook type of program. Some of them are mounted in a bus or truck, and the driver can just even show a picture of the bus and mark the area where the defect is and make a little note. So there are systems like that we could look into to determine, is saving $16,000 annually from printing costs, will it pay for the system over time? Then we also looked into the Avail system that's on our buses now, and that's used, the fleet guys can help me, but it's used for GPS tracking, all things related to the bus, right, while the driver's driving it. There is a reporting type system within that we're currently not utilizing. So we recommended also that we look at outside programs, but we also, first of all, look at our Avail system to see if we can switch to using that section of Avail and stop the logbooks. So that was one of the recommendations. So,
Brian, let me interrupt you again.
yep.
Do you know, or does somebody in the staff know what's the useful life of something like this? So an electronic
The system?
solution? Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Do we know the Avail system useful life? I think we keep it as long as we have the bus, right?
This is Cheryl Purefoy, Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and yes, that is correct. That is correct. We do keep the systems as long as we have the buses in place.
Okay.
Our CAD-EVL system ties in all of our scheduling data and everything. So there is a feature on there that does maintenance health tracking of the buses. And so that's what he was referring to. So we're just seeing if we can turn it on or use it, or is it going to meet our needs?
Okay, so I guess that answers my question. So if it's a viable option, then there's not a big deal about a return on investment over some lifespan, right? I mean, the lifespan is 5 years.
Yes.
And it costs $200,000. We're never going to
It
get
wouldn't
the
be worth
ROI,
it, right? But
if we can use this, we don't have to worry about the ROI because we already got it. We're already paying.
yes, it's on our bus and for the length of the time that we have the bus on the road.
Okay, thank you.
Since 2019. And we're, it's a big system to replace. So we have it, for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thanks, Annette.
Our next recommendation out of this, the defect tracker spreadsheet I was mentioning was originally titled Safety Sensitive Defect Tracker, which makes you think, oh, it's a major problem and that there's a safety issue on the bus. And that's not what it was. It was just named that. So we suggested that they change the spreadsheet name to just Defect Tracker, because a crack in the mirror or the driver's seat not adjusting right is not a safety issue with harming folks on the road with our bus, like a brake fail would be. So the management action plan, so we met with the fleet services and they have determined that they were definitely able to look at the Avail system and determine if its capabilities and if it can be utilized for that purpose. So they originally had a deadline for the end of October, but they're still working out in some glitches, and Devin's here to make sure that it can transpose, I guess, the documentation correctly for them to be able to keep it. So it's under their guise right now and they're looking at it. They do already have completed naming of the spreadsheet. They've already changed that. And to review the logbooks as they are coming in more thoroughly to make sure that things are getting off the logbook and into the spreadsheet. So that was the two things that have already been completed since we did the review. Any questions on this section on defect reporting? No. The next item is observation 2, and this is regarding fueling and fluids. So we determined that originally when the buses came in at night, when they're going through the washing process, all the fluids are looked at by staff to determine if any top-offs need done and everything like that. Well, there are two top-off areas, which include motor oil and transmission fluid, and they're within the opening the engine compartment. So we determined by meeting with folks that we had an error happen where we had some cross-contamination of fluids. Come to find out, our antifreeze, our diesel fuel, and our transmission service oil all colored red. So you could have a conflict there if you weren't totally specifically careful reading what you were looking at. So we determined that the maintenance department took it upon themselves to transfer the process of opening the engine compartment and checking any fluids to go directly to maintenance. It's determined, like, for example, the oil pan on a bus is large enough that we have a pretty good supply of oil that they're not going to get stuck out on the road. Plus our buses have warning systems. We're low on oil, we're low on transmission fluid. So the fleet department graciously turned over that responsibility to maintenance, and maintenance is assured that that's what they check on a preventive maintenance, which happens monthly anyway. So we took that responsibility and it was moved to the maintenance department. The second piece of this, which if you remember when we did a termination review, oh gosh, it took a couple quarters ago, we have the fleet watch system for our buses, and that's where the fueling is done. It's also being used for other vehicles, non-revenue and revenue vehicles. So out of that, we went back, and if you remember, I asked, that said we would do this at our last meeting, and we did it. We called the fleet services folks, and they provided us a list that they were able to download out of the Avail system to determine all of the users in that system. And then rather than just say, has everybody been removed that's quit working at Indigo, we asked the Department of People for our list of terminations over a year, so that we were able to cross-reference them ourselves without, I guess, skewing things by saying in advance, you have people that shouldn't be in the system yet. So we determined there were 125 individuals listed still in the fleet watch system that if they could have gotten our building and gotten to a pump and put in a code, they could have pumped fuel. And they weren't employed here anymore. So we were able to recognize all of those folks, get it to the fleet services people. They were able to strip them off the system. And so we have a risk mitigated there. The second piece of that was after they did that, we went back and then looked at all job changes that affected the transportation group. So in other words, if I was a person at the general labor that was pumping fuel, and now I'm in a different world of work, maybe I work in, let's say, accounting, we're making sure that people who transferred out of that responsibility of a job were also removed from the system. So we have a good handle on who's logged into Avail system and can use it. And then we met with the HR department and said, can you please provide fleet services an update of who leaves the company or transfers jobs so that they can properly update the fuel dispensing? And that's been done, and they've been receiving those now.
With what frequency, Brian?
So you get a termination as soon as it occurs, right?
cross references, we want personnel, and if any of those people are in need, if we watch their media, what's happened pretty much as soon as.
Real time.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, so that was a major change, and thanks for the new folks that are managing fleet. We're able to get that resolved pretty quickly, actually. Any questions on fluids and fueling? The next observation, number 3, is our paratransit fleet and the required preventive maintenance that has to be done on a regular basis. And we determined that our current paratransit contractor is fully compliant with the preventive maintenance schedule of our fleet. We were able to pull all of the records of the fleet and look like when was their last preventive maintenance plan done, which includes like oil changes, filter changes, the basic stuff that we normally have to do with vehicles, right? And they have a pretty slick system that's electronic tracking of all the preventive maintenance and what's done. So they were easily able to pull us reports to look at that. We did determine that the prior contractor for paratransit got delinquent in preventive maintenance before they left. And so the new contractor, it took effect in April of 2025. It took them a month and a half to get all of our buses up current on the preventive maintenance, but they've maintained them that way since. So that's a positive thing that came out of this and that they had already taken a handle of. One of the recommendations that we determined or observations was that the preventive maintenance records for our fleet prior to our current new contractor were all done manually and on paper. So those are kept in the offices of our paratransit maintenance department in a file cabinet. So we wanted to make sure that before the triennial review rolls around, that nothing happens to those because we have a new contractor. So the maintenance departments made it very clear to the paratransit contractor that those be kept under lock and key and that we have those for the required length of time. And they are also, the contractors providing our maintenance department that a monthly report of all the preventive maintenances and error or repairs needed to be done on our paratransit fleet, which is a fleet consisting of 75 buses right now. Any questions on that? So,
Hey, Brian, I do on the fuel thing. So if people had access to that, I mean, is that fuel and oil and stuff that you could use personally? I mean, is
well,
that
it
what
would be
you're
hard
saying?
with the diesel fuel, right?
Right,
Because
right.
we
That's
have
why-
like non-tax diesel fuel. So if you got caught within your vehicle along the road, you're going to be in big trouble.
Right.
But also, it's just a matter of to reduce any chance of mitigation because we do have unleaded gasoline pump, but they would have to still get through the barrier of our security and in the facility to do that.
So the pumps are inside the.
All of our diesels are inside, yeah. Diesel pumps are indoors. It's
Okay.
part of the washing process. I think it happens right before they're washed. Yeah, the fluids are topped off right before washing.
Okay.
So they keep them topped every night.
You know, I think this is a very good policy to keep those with, you know, with the people that are using them and haven't had them in the
Right.
past. But that's how I was sitting there wondering with my background in trucking, say, how could they use the fuel?
That would be difficult unless you had a special need.
Right.
Curiosity, Brian, or is there a cost, is this like a software license? So we have to pay for everybody that has a PIN code to
Can you-
access?
Can you come to the mic? Thank you.
There we go. No, it does not. It's just a list in the system, but it is not a service-based thing or a license-based thing per person. It is just who is able to plug in that number in the system. So for instance, at night, our general laborers, when they come up to pump the fuel into the vehicle, they'll go up, there's a little box right there, and whatever their number is, they'll plug in their number. And the Fleet Watch says, okay, general labor number so-and-so has pumped 30 gallons. The issue that Brian was seeing is, so we do have an unleaded pump, which is more accessible and it is on the outside of the building. It's still protected by fences, but it is on the outside. And the way those systems is as long as you knew your old number, you could go in and, 1172 or whatever it was. And if the system said you were in there, it could just run it.
So they could theoretically, if they could bring their POV in and fill it up with unleaded gas and you would have no way of knowing that it wasn't an Indigo vehicle, that it was a personally owned vehicle.
Correct. That was the concern that Brian flagged.
Okay.
With those excess people in the system, because we could have seen it later after the fact. It would have said, oh, well, this person is no longer here. If we had looked at who had but the system would not have stopped that person. So this is why we implemented that as soon as somebody is terminated at Indigo, we remove them automatically from Fleet Watch. And that was working with HR to get set up on the information that they are putting out.
Okay, great, thanks.
So if we could go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you, in your packet, this is a list of the preventive maintenance items that are checked with the paratransit buses at every 5,000 mile interval. And it's everything from lights and safety equipment to oil, brakes, shocks. They have a whole list of things that they do every 5,000 miles. And I wanted to mention this also, at no time during the year that we look back on, did we have a shortage of paratransit buses to provide the service needs of our customers due to any preventive maintenance problems or maintenance problems. We were always able to provide vehicles for our customers. Any questions on that? The next observation is basically the same thing, but it's relative to what Indigo staff does ourselves in our garage, and it's relative to the preventive maintenance on our BRT buses and our fixed route. So we determined that when we looked at the preventive maintenance schedules on our buses, it's very similar. We have an electronic system, and we determined that none of our vehicles that our staff maintains were delinquent in preventive maintenance. And that's a major thing because they have a lot of them to take care of. And it looks like based upon the mileage our buses are used, it hits it about every 30 days, the bus is in for preventive maintenance. This isn't like repairs for a breakdown. This is things to keep the items that are required by FTA and their manufacturer, like how frequently is the oil changed, that kind of thing, and filters changed. The records are maintained electronically on our Dynaway D365 system. And if you go into the garage, this is pretty cool. You go into the garage, we have an area, an office that they call the fishbowl. It's glass, and then they have observation of the entire maintenance department and what's going on. But they have some large screen monitors like we have in this room. And it's always being fed and updated with data out of Dynaway that they can look and see, let's probably list 20 buses. What are the next buses up and due for preventive maintenance, and how many miles do they have on the road before it has to be done? So they can look every day at this list and they know which ones to pull in to do the preventive maintenance and update it. So it's pretty slick, actually. They do a really good job with their preventive maintenance. Let's see. We did note that at no time were we not able to provide BRT services or fixed route services because we had too many buses down for maintenance. That did not occur ever. So if we could go to the next slide. I have a chart there on bus availability. So we went back and we went from January 2024 through July of 2025 when we were building this report. And the service planning folks provided me data like each month, how many buses are required to run our routes. And then separately, I went to maintenance and I said, they were able to run the report that says, how many buses did we have available throughout each day during a given month? So we determined here that if in this chart, as the left side is the number of buses we had in service, and then the far right side is how many buses were required to provide our routes for that month, if that makes sense. So for example, in January 2024, we had 171 buses that are considered in service. Out of that, the number available is 144. So that means around 20 to 30 of them were in for maintenance or preventive maintenance. And then the far right column says we needed 104 buses to meet the routes. So at no time did we short our customer base fixed route or BRT services because we have buses down in maintenance. It's just not the case. Any questions on that?
And when a driver comes in and are they assigned the same bus?
I don't believe so, but the scheduling folks, I think it's availability and what buses that they have available for blocks of routes. And that can definitely help us.
We determine what type of bus goes on a particular piece of work, but depending on how they park the garage, they are assigned it every morning, but it's not the same bus to the same operator. So we don't have a way to sort of control for that, so.
So, because what I was wondering if if they were driving the same bus every day, then they're gonna have pretty good knowledge as to what's going on
Sure,
with that vehicle and what may be a problem or not a problem.
sure.
So
So,
I imagine it makes it much more difficult when you're driving a different bus every day and then trying to coordinate with maintenance if there's an issue or not.
right, so every day, the buses go out, the routes go out in a certain order. So depending on how they come back in, how they make it through the wash rack and fueling island to get parked, and if they were pulled for maintenance, we have no way to sort of make sure that they're lined up. So because they roll out in a very orchestrated fashion based on departure and to get to their first pickup.
And then when the drivers come back in, are they supposed to make any sort of a report each day or only if there's an issue?
That's what the logbook is for, if there's an issue. But prior to they going out, they do a pre-check evaluation of the bus that's on the same
Come
logbook.
back in.
When they come back in, they're supposed to note any error, any problems with the bus on that section of the book.
So we pay them at the beginning of every shift, you get 10 minutes time to get your bus, go out, check it out, write it up before you leave. And then at the end of the night, you get paid 5 minutes for turn-in time. So that way they can turn anything like schedules, whatever, or report if there's anything else.
Okay, so that should eliminate if it comes in the morning, say, or on a shift, and that the bus should all be ready to go and
Right.
any issues that had happened the day before, or 2 days before, whatever, are resolved, right?
Theory, you'd be assigned a bus that's ready for service. So if something happened the day before and there's no mirror on the side, they wouldn't send that bus out, right? So they'd be putting it in a defect area.
All right.
One of the positive things noted out this is, most of our fleet is the same manufacturer, so there's a similarity between buses. But secondly, this process allows a rotation of the use of buses. So we're not hammering the same 30 buses with high mileage and wearing them out while others are resting in the garage.
And from an equity standpoint, you don't want to put the same buses on the same routes and the same side of the city. You want to spread them out. So if you get a bunch of new buses, you want to sprinkle them throughout the system and not just put them in one area.
Yeah, I've noticed lately several new buses running on the lines. And so I see exactly what you're saying.
Hey, Annette, what information are these logbook? I guess, what information do you collect in the logbook? Is it just maintenance stuff or is there other?
So like if
Information
there's
that you-
accident damage or the condition of the bus or something, is not functioning properly, like if the destination sign's not working, right? You'd write that up. I mean, we really wouldn't want to send the bus out without that working, but if we can still run service even if that's not 100%. We don't want to, but so those things are, sometimes it might be not a full malfunction where it's not working, but things like that. So there's a whole list that,
So it's a scratch and it can be anything from scratch and dent to, the transmission's falling out.
right, exactly. Or there's something with the tie, anything.
But on those severe items, the maintenance department grabs those right away and runs them into maintenance without
Or-
going to the garage.
Or if you're on the road, they're going to call it in and swap out your bus and make sure that, you're not driving if it's a major safety issue.
So I personally want to thank the maintenance guys and the fleet services folks. They were just very welcoming to us coming in and looking at records. They provided any record we wanted and were very open to our suggestions. So that's very much appreciated. And they've already changed most of the things other than using the veil in lieu of logbooks, and they're reviewing that right now. So any questions on the preventive maintenance of our fleet? Thank you. Yep.
If you could just kind of make a mental note, I'd really be interested in finding out what the outcome of an electronic solution is for those logbooks.
Well, that would be on our observation list. So that will be something definitely that Amy would follow back up on to see what we determined or if we were able to put it in place. So we definitely can provide that to you. I think we're ready for the next report, which Amy's going to do. Yes.
Okay, good afternoon again, directors. The BMV check review had, the review was part of the 2025 audit plan that was approved. And our focus was to evaluate the effectiveness of Indigo's BMV checks process and to ensure compliance with CDL requirements and assess the frequency and reliability of our BMV checks for each of the coach operators. The scope of our review and the audit was aimed to evaluate the policies, procedures, and controls surrounding Indigo's BMV checks process, specifically ensuring that employees maintained a valid CDL, assessing the frequency and consistency of our checks that we perform with the BMV, and also making sure alignment with DOT, FTA, FMCSA regulations. The overall risk rating was considered low. Total number of observations were 2, both assessed at a low risk. And it was noted that no high or medium risk were identified in that review. So, and our observations focus on the standard operating procedures or the SOPs and then reporting of the BMV checks. So the first observation is Indigo has SOPs in place for BMV checks. There were 3 SOPs that were out there. One was regarding an SOP for the insurance process, DVR auditing, and then the license status. And that one actually was noted to be pending approval, so it was still under legal review and not finalized as of the time we did our review. So the SOPs are generally well-defined in reviewing them and compliant with all the regulations, DOT, FTA, and like I said, FMCSA. Our recommendation that came from this observation was legal should finalize the SOP and ensure it's distributed to relevant staff. And management's response to that in risk and safeties, legal is review is in process and a due date of October 20th, 25. I just followed up since obviously our review got delayed by a month, or this presentation did. Risk and safety mentioned that they think that it's still in legal's hands, just pending the finalization of it. So it's been written, so it's kind of sitting there just waiting for their review. So and I will be following up on this just to make sure it gets finalized and distributed to all the staff that's involved in the BMV checks. So we move on to slide 5.
Amy, before you
Yes.
get there, this may be a Brett question for you. I'm not sure. But you know, in the news recently, I've been hearing a lot about these truck drivers that have CDLs that shouldn't have them. Do we have I know you have a process in place to make sure that people are citizens or green card holders, eligible to work for us. But do we have a process to make sure that if they come to us with a CDL, that it's legitimate? I mean, that may not be your wheelhouse, but.
Britt Griffin, Chief People Officer. I think that's something we want to look into. We don't currently have a process that I'm aware of, but I can check on that and get back to you though.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious if we have a way to make sure that the people that have a CDL, it's a valid CDL.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
Yeah, so if you go on to the next, I'm sorry, go ahead.
if I may, I don't know the details, Director Wilson, but I do know when you're a CDL holder and you apply for a CDL job, there's like a form that comes from your prior employer. Because I've seen those forms arrive here. Sometimes they come to things that are bound for HR, tend to come to legal sometimes. So I do know there's sort of a check there to make sure a CDL is valid. I just can't go into I don't know all the details. I just know it exists.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up, because I've seen like 4 or 5 news reports over the course of the last 3 weeks of people who are driving semi trucks, big rig trucks, that they go to these license mills or whatever, and they're not really qualified to drive. And I'm thinking, well, if we've got somebody driving 60 passenger or 40 passenger bus with human beings on it and they're not qualified to drive, we ought to probably know about that.
I kind of know this exists too because my brother's a truck driver, so I just, yeah. And I don't see Brian Clem, our Director of Risk and Safety here. I'm not sure he was asked to be here, but he could probably answer some of these better.
Yeah. And
Oh,
sorry.
actually, I just got a message from my my Deputy Chief Legal Officer, Latasha Higgins, who's watching online. Yeah, and it's the B&B checks. That's part of the B&B check, that it does tell us if the CDL is legitimate.
So that'll bring us to the next observation. For the second observation noted, it's in reference to the reporting of the B&B checks. So it was noted that the reporting system experienced some issues in 2024, including missed checks and incomplete data. And I think that came from, as you know, the Department of People. There was just some stuff being missed. Also, it was noted that Indigo Risk and Safety worked with the BMV to develop a more economical and efficient license check process. They end up implementing a more economical solution, which was basically reducing the cost to $1 per record for doing those checks to ensure they're valid. And so in addition to that, that we stated there was over 200 missing license record identified. And that was largely resolved through the updates to the ADP system. And subsequently, missing license data significantly reduced since that time of those the updates to ADP.
Amy, do we know, when you're looking at this, do you guys look for like root cause? Like, why is it that we have 200 missing records? How does that happen?
It was, and I wish that Brian was here. Can you speak to that, since I know that you had dealt with some of this stuff through ADP?
Brett Griffin again, Chief People Officer. There's two things that happen when you convert data over to a system. One, you have the opportunity to retain the history. I know Brian's not here this before my time, so I'm not sure how far these go back. So when we updated the system, maybe some of the history did not get converted over. Or when ADP updated the system, there was some sort of malfunction in the update. Something I can think of without actually going through and looking at it more closely. Yeah.
Do we have, I don't want to get too far afield here, but do we have some kind of a process or something so that we can flag this stuff and find out about it?
We can look into that further once I talk to Brian. Yeah.
It just seems to me seems like a lot of numbers of records to be missing, especially for these kinds of circumstances.
And so they have gone back and made obviously significant strides to reduce that. So I was actually asking.
If you remember when we did the I-9 verification process, they found a lot of the driver's license in paper format and that they were then able to upload into the ADP system.
This was just a failure of someone to upload it into the system at some point in the past.
So they kind of gone through, and by doing these checks, they've gone through to see what's been missing and where the breakdown is. And if we have it in paper copy, if we have it on the system, it just can get attached to their file, so they're doing that. And by doing those checks ongoing in risk and safety, that's where they're finding the gaps and the missing ones. And then, so part of the regulatory compliance piece of this review, was that we looked to, because there's a compliance piece, is 49 U.S.C. 13 that mandates that employers must not allow operation of commercial vehicles by individuals with revoked, suspended, or multiple licenses. And then we also, annual driving record reviews are required and must be documented. So all of those things are, kind of put your arms around making sure that they have a valid CDL. And, so that's part of the check process.
And we're doing all of this currently now.
Yes.
So we've kind of solved that issue.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got, just to go along with that, if somebody does lose their license or is suspended by the state, how do we get notice of that?
Well, they are required to notify us as an
Who?
employee, the employee.
I know, but what if they don't?
If they don't, that's why these checks are in place, that they're going to be doing monthly checks to make sure that I mean, something could happen, I guess, I suppose, in between the time it was checked.
That's what I'm.
So, but that's, we're putting some of that ownership back onto the employee to report it. And then, I don't know what, I wish Risk could say he was on here,
When you
but,
read this, I guess the lawyer comes out in me a little bit, when it says you should, employer knows or should reasonably know that the employee has a driver's license revoked, suspended, or canceled by the state.
so the reasonably piece, right?
Yeah,
I
what's
mean,
that?
like what does that mean? It's loose verbiage, but,
And then you turn to Brother Bob and say, well, how are we liable if somebody's driving on a suspended or revoked license and there's an accident or
So if-
Bob?
And well, and kind of like Amy said, this is why we need to do these periodic checks
Yeah,
ourselves.
they'll just wonder.
Sorry. Bob, I'm starting with Greg on this thing. If you do, let's say we do the check on November 20th, and I get my license suspended on November 30th, and I don't tell anybody that my license has been suspended, and we don't check again until December, well, with the holidays, maybe we don't check it until December 28th. Are we opening ourselves up some kind of liability between November 30th and December 28th?
I don't think the liability is any greater. Like if the operator was already in a wreck that was his or her fault, right, the liability is there regardless. Because it's just simply, it's not practical. We can't check the status of people's licenses every day. It just wouldn't, right? Cost prohibitive too, because there is a cost to this checks. I think we have a pretty favorable contract with BMV because we're a government entity, but there's still a cost for every
Right,
record that we
right.
check. So yeah, there is a risk there. There is a liability there, but I don't see it being any greater than and the other thing, because we are government, we're protected by, with limits to our liability, right? So the fact that the CDL may have been suspended or expired isn't necessarily, it's not going to do anything to increase our liability above the tort claim limit.
What did, in your previous life, what does Department of Public Works do? There's all of us have the same situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I do not recall in my time there being any kind of discussion about these periodic checks. I don't know if they do them or not.
Okay.
That would mostly be probably the DPW, the folks that drive the large trucks, the snowplow trucks,
that's
and the asphalt trucks. There might be yeah.
So we did note with the new agreement with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, we used to the FTA requires you to check that, but not as frequently as monthly. But we would send our list of drivers and they would run a check. Now with the new system they've put in place, we send our initial list of drivers, they maintain that. And then they can check when we ask. And all we do now is send updates and deletes. So they have our fleet, our coach operators in a file at BMV at all times now, which didn't used to be. We'd send the file, they'd run it. Now they maintain it and we send adjustments to the file as terminations occur or job changes occur, or we hire.
But they don't contact us.
We contact them.
Right, but I'm saying if their license is canceled, suspended, whatever, they don't contact us.
They would not.
Right, okay, that's what I thought.
and the BMV is actually going to be implementing a new system for the record of that, which will automate those record downloads a lot easier for us to access, improve our monthly CDL checks significantly. So, but it's obviously there right now as one of our recommendations. It's, continue enhancing the reporting and full training on the upcoming system upgrade and all of that. But, and then also obviously collaborate with the Department of People to maintain accurate and complete license records and data. But this new system will like really make it more streamlined and help us to be able to pull those checks more frequency. And what, as to Bob's point, we have $1 per record now, which is a great deal with the DMV. So,
So it mentions, this is my last question, I promise. Mentions that the coach operators and vehicle mechanics. Vehicle mechanics need a CDL?
yes, they're moving, they're moving the
So
buses. So,
just to move a bus in our garage?
They leave our property.
yeah.
Oh, they do?
They leave our property for test run, or they even going back to the back part of the south parking lot, they have to cross Harding Street or drive down Harding Street.
Oh.
And they cannot pull off our property without a CDL in our bus.
But it's a, well, I guess younger, like if we get younger, staff, they can get a CDL, but it won't transport people or so there's a caveat in there where, different, like, I guess levels for a better word of a CDL. So.
Okay. All right, I'm done now, I promise.
Okay, so basically the management response is all I have left for this, and it's all applications for the new, to be part of that new BMV system have been submitted by Risk and Safety. Indigo, we're just now waiting on that access to that new system when they launch it. And so as of November 1st, they thought that hopefully it would be in place, but I just talked to Risk and Safety earlier, and they indicated that they're just at the mercy of the BMA in the state to try to get, they have no way of knowing exactly when they're gonna launch that new system for us. But so, other than that, I think they're making some good headway on those, and they're kind of getting their arms around the checks and doing it more frequently. And those missing records were getting control of too and getting them all updated. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And then I think the next item is 2025-13. And that has to do with the assessment and placement testing review report. Brian Atkinson.
Yes, again, Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit here at Indigo. So the purpose of this was to look at the testing requirements on hiring and eligible employees that we hire, because some of our departments or specific job classifications require testing to determine if the employee or potential employee could do the position that they're being hired for. So out of our scope, and what we reviewed the policies, procedures, and controls on the assessment placement testing. What we considered key things to look at was what's included on the test, which positions require tests, and what are the pass-fail rates on the different tests. So we came up with a total of 3 observations, one of which we noted as a high risk, and 2 that we noted as medium. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we looked at the various tests determined and assigned throughout the departments on hiring folks. And this first observation was the quality of the test. So I'm going to use our worst example that we found. For hiring in the Treasury Department, we determined that the test is, for the most part, multiple choice testing, but we then took the test. And so when on taking the test, I took the test. I could look at, like, it would give me a scenario of maybe how to count change. And it would give me a multiple choice options. And in like the very first question of the 4 multiple choice answers, they were all valid. It would be a matter of like, where's the placement of the decimal point in the number? Is the answer 1, or is the answer 1.0, or the answer 1.00? So I absolutely, my heart about came out of my chest when I looked at that. It was because I was like, oh, this isn't right. So we did look at other tests. And like in the maintenance department, they had reviewed their own test and updated as necessary. So what we determined is that sometimes there were also questions on the test were not really relative to the job placement itself. So our recommendation that came out of this was to stop using the current test for the fare box repairer, which is a Treasury employee, that we redesign all the tests and use department knowledge-based people to help develop or review the test. And that way we have subject matter experts helping set that as well as minimum scores for the test. And then part of that agreement is these positions that are tested are represented staff members. So the suggestion is also to meet with the union representatives to determine, help iron out the test and determine, are we testing on the correct job classifications? And they do agree with the quality of our test. So the management action plan on this is they have are sending the test to all hiring managers in each department to review the test and ask them to check it for accuracy or suggest redesigns of the test. And so that's supposed to be happening, that they will all be gone through by the third quarter of 2026. But right now we did request that one be stopped. Let's see, any questions on the test process? The next thing that we looked at.
Brian,
Yeah.
do we have any like educational partners, people that we
Oh, well, I'm
also work
a little bit later into this. Yeah. It's the system that we use to provide the test and it helped develop the test. Yes. And I have a section on that.
Okay.
The next observation is our staff and labor relations folks. So we have a labor relations individual at Indigo staff who's currently working on the hiring processes for represented employees. And so what they're doing is they're determining weighted scores. So in other words, if I go in for an interview at Indigo and I take a test, maybe my test is worth 75% of my score to determine if I'm hired or not. How well did I interview? Those type of things. So they're going through every single job at Indigo and determining a percentage of what's required to consider being a pass to be hired by us and what weight to put on tests compared to interview process and that kind of thing. The basic knowledge. So they are looking at the system roles within the testing environment. So in other words, if we don't have a particular job classification anymore, if it's been changed, they're looking at those as well to make sure they're updated with our current job listing. So our current recommendations was to continue hiring and assigning staff for testing purposes. In other words, having our HR folks be up to speed on the test and which ones get tested and which ones don't. Provide a refresher training on our platform that the tests are held in within the Department of People, because we had a pretty significant turnover of the people who are recruiters and that provided the test. So we just want to make sure that they've got complete training on the system. And we suggested that in that system, we update the user role so that maybe like everyone who has access to the system, maybe I can give the test, but I shouldn't be allowed to adjust the test. So we want to make sure that we have the correct people in the right roles for that system. So that is what our responsibilities were, an action plan request for this particular observation. Any questions on this? Okay, our third and final observation on this report was it's the eSkills testing platform. So that's the name of the platform and the company that we contract to develop and maintain the testing platform. We determined that it is a pretty robust system. And but where I think we failed in years past was we let the system build our tests for us. And so we depended too heavily on that. You do have the capability of have the system build your test. Then you can go through the test and edit it, change questions, or add your own if you want. You can also build your own test and update in the system. So we determined that the system works. We just need to do a better job of making it unique for our need rather than what the company can provide or that can test come out within this by particular job classifications.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
just a quick question. So is there like Tim Cox Group, are they responsible for overseeing who's the belly button for any training that happens here at Indigo?
Well, we definitely have the training group, which just falls under Tim, but this was I think for this particular, you mean like as in this eSkill platform, how to use it? Or
No, you mentioned that they were using these canned.
So the eSkills was originally contracted by the department people before the current folks are here. And then they had the system develop tests. And I think it's just, became stagnant and not looked at often enough, or maybe push them out to staff who are experts in the field to take the test and say what's wrong with it. So that's what they're doing now. And
People that are doing that are Tim's.
labor relations works in your department, right? So it's Britt's folks.
Oh.
And they're developing a robust procedure and policy for every job at Indigo now.
Okay, all right, thanks.
It's a big lift and they've got, a couple months work into it already. So our recommendation is not to replace the e-skills test. It's just testing platform. It's just to update it and verify that the data that we have in there is correct and it's accurate for the job classifications that we're testing for. Any questions on the testing platform? And that we rated as a medium just because it's not the problem of the platform, it's the data that we have in the platform. Any questions on that? Thank you very much. And the next things, that's the end of our observation reports, and then we have information items.
And then information. I2, support point status report of 2020 to 2021. And Amy,
Good afternoon. It's the last time you'll have to hear from me today, so that's probably good. So the first page of this shows kind of what our plan is, where we're at on that. With the stars, we're originally determined we were going to look at those reviews, which are 6 of them, which we pushed 4 of them out in this quarter. We pushed actually 2 of them into Q4 along with our annual risk refresh. So those shifted just so we'd have enough time to fully review each of the areas. We were a little heavy on Q3. So therefore we pushed rehire eligibility, and we also pushed out security all facilities review. So that, again, along with our annual risk review, will be covered in January's audit committee meeting. So that kind of explains that page. The next page is where we track the prior audit findings and their status. So there are 7 reviews we're still carrying forward and being tracked, which out of those 7 have a total of 21 observations noted. 7 have been closed, 14 are still open with future dates, and we have 0 considered past due at this time. Did anybody have any questions on those? You guys pretty get it every quarter. And so the next page basically just is a running total of all the audits we've completed to date. And there are a total of 56 that you all have lived through. So that's all I have for that.
okay. Any questions, Rick?
One quick one. Brian, Amy, for either of you. So we're keeping track of these 57 reviews that we've done. Are we looking at going back and looking at any of these again within some timeframe?
A part of what we've determined we're going to do is that rotational review and assigning a date of 2 to 3 years in between maybe reviews and or 5 if after we reviewed it, there's been pretty low risk and find much. We're going to put it on a kind of a rotational review. And so anything with higher risk or that have had stuff that's carried over and that we want to go back, part of that rotational review will be opening the prior audit report, even if it's 2, 3, 5 years old, and going back and making sure that we're still following these same guidelines or whatever we've recommended, and make sure that management is still on track. Or if there have been changes, we need to justify or note those as to why a processor has changed. So that is going to be a 2026 deliverable for you guys,
All right,
is to see that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I think our final is information item I3, and that's the Ethics Advocate Hotline Summary Report. Brian Atkinson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, again, Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit. So our quarterly activity from July 1 through September 30th of our ethics hotline, we had one report come in, and it was done by the website. And we were able to we download the report, look at it, get involved with the stakeholders and the department managers that are necessary to look at it. We determined that what was reported to us was not an ethics issue at all. It was just a matter of a human resource issue with an employee complaining to them. And so we were able to give that over to Britt's group, and they were able to make resolution on that. Sometimes people get overzealous and report something on the ethical hotline that maybe is not really an ethics issue. It's just maybe a quick fix or an HR problem. So they were able to take care of that for us. Every other Monday when we have a new hire orientation class by our onboarding folks, I go or Amy goes and we give a presentation that explains to our new hires the whole ethics reporting process. We provide them with a card with the website, 24-hour phone number that they can make a report, and instill in them that if there's a problem that you believe is occurring and it could be an unlawful activity or detrimental to Indigo's welfare or our customers' welfare or our staff welfare, to be sure and report it, because we can vet it out. We can look at it and determine and get to the right people. I just, before we close, I wanted to say we're currently in the risk assessment world. So we started that week before last, and we've met with a number of staff members. We have 40 some staff members to meet with, and we're going to reach out to you if you would like to be interviewed as well. The goal is to have these done in December, and that way we can build the risk review and heat map for the new year of 2026. And as Amy mentioned, a lot of times when we review staff, they're like, well, I can't think of, but maybe one more thing that I provided last year. So we'll go ahead and list it, because we didn't make our ability to do the review last year, because we have 17 of them we've done for 2025. Takes a lot of time. So we determined not every item can be reviewed every year. So that's where we're going to look at any repeat items that get brought up to put in the rotational piece as well.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda, and all items discussed today will be entered into the record as part of the Governance and Audit Department report at the next scheduled full board meeting. So our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Probably should have invited Brian Flynn to this, and we failed to, so. He's here. If you had any other questions about license check, he probably knows more than anybody. Nobody invited you tonight.